Welcome to the Culture Surge briefing on the Storytellers Guide to Changing Our World. My name is Maria Bangi, and I'm the Executive Director of Harness. We are so excited to be sharing the Storytellers Guide with you here today. The guide is a resource for creatives of all types that explores a core story that we believe research and experience tells us motivates critical audiences in this election and beyond. Culture Surge believes that artists and storytellers are the visionary leaders needed to galvanize us towards a future rooted in justice, care, and connection. Our core belief is that you are the essential workers of the future. You help us imagine the world we want to build together. In this moment of instability, uncertainty, and deepening division, we need art to help us make meaning and find hope. That is why Culture Surge exists, to help connect artists with those moving people to vote in this crucial moment and with the movements for justice in this country so that we can combine all of our powers to imagine and co-create our new world. Today, Culture Surge is a new network of artists, organizations, cultural and narrative strategists, movement groups, creative and entertainment companies, and others that represent the best cultural thinkers and doers committed to coming together to have a significant impact on this election. We are C3, which means we're about civic engagement and education. Culture Surge brings together culture and the movement. Our powerful network allows us to combine the skills to imagine a new future, broaden minds, and inspire hearts, with on-the-ground partners in pivotal regions across the country. Our focus is to strategically expand the electorate by generating enthusiasm among hard-to-reach audiences and engaging them in collective, nonpartisan action. Culture Surge does this by coordinating, informing, and scaling the effectiveness of relational organizing and content created by our unparalleled network, which means all of you. We also aggregate other resources for our network, including things like a shared civic and cultural calendar created by our partners at Into Action, a list of funding opportunities for creating content, which I know many of you will be interested in, and examples of effective and inspiring projects, as well as best practices, data, and research, which is distilled and translated to make what we already know more actionable. So as you see on your screen, it's the way that we talk about it, it's a women of color-led network of storytellers, artists, organizers, and media partners working together in this vital moment for the survival of our communities, our democracy, and our shared future. And the anchor organizations that have been tasked by many of our field partners to launch Culture Surge are Harness, the Center for Cultural Power, the League, and IllumiNative. Next slide. So we are going to be focusing our efforts both nationally and with very specific, in very specific important parts of our country. The key states we're going to be looking at are Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. In consultation with our partners and with electoral strategists, we identified where civic engagement is depressed and where collective efforts can have an outsized impact to really help ramp up civic engagement in 2020. The key audiences that we're looking at are Black people, Indigenous peoples, people of color, young people, and women. Communities of color, as well as young people, are battling feelings of isolation and apathy, often leading to disenfranchisement. The social and economic instability and inequity further inflamed by COVID-19 are increasing those effects. Traditional voter engagement strategy underinvests in the issues and needs of young people and of communities of color. They're then sidelined and their civic participation suffers. Culture has a critical role to play in inspiring engagement, often serving as an entry point for lifelong leadership, civic engagement, and power building. For example, we know that 28% of young people heard about the 2018 election from social media alone. So the power of culture is unprecedented in this moment to be able to reach crucial audiences and make sure that all of us are engaged in what may very well be the most important election of our lives. We're going to be doing this through a series of things that we're calling Surge Weeks. So very shortly, we're going to be 100 days out from the election on July 26th. I hope that doesn't give anybody else anxiety. But what that means is that we're going to have 4 Surge Weeks to help amplify and coordinate the coordination of the cultural community. Surge Weeks are cultural weeks of action to amplify all of our civic engagement activities. We will be sending out specific calls to action that will be for creatives during those weeks. These will be easy, artistic prompts to guide folks in creating content. The calls to action will be designed to address voting barriers and uplift our core story themes, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So as you see on this slide, our first Surge Week will really be around the DNC and RNC and talking about voter registration in August. And then we'll have another one in September, October, and November. Our full list of civic and cultural dates lives on our website at culturesurge.com. So if you don't get this now, you can definitely come to our website later and see this. How can you join Culture Surge, right? If this is something that is really meant to be a center of gravity for people that are interested in using the power of storytelling and culture to activate in this election and really drive participation of key audiences, right? And make sure that we are all civically engaged and we are all able to use our power in this critical moment. There's a few different things you can do. The first is that every institution and individual who wants to learn together, create content, and help amplify our calls to action can sign up on our website at culturesurge.com. There's a link that says join us, and you fill out a simple membership form that will give you access to briefings like this, research, etc., so that you can stay coordinated with the larger field. In addition, we have partners we have over 25 institutions and strategists working together, deeply engaged in planning and executing our Surge Weeks currently. So these are people who are thinking every day, how is it that we are really going to make sure that we can coordinate the cultural field in a way that can have the largest impact in 2020. And then finally, we have advisors who are experts from lead organizations working at the intersection of culture and civic engagement who give critical advice to our work. So what we're really asking for you to do today is join us to create change on November 3rd. Together, we can generate the power to bring about a just, caring, and equitable future. And today, the presentation that you're going to hear is really about the Storytellers Guide, which I'm going to share just a little bit of a background story, is really about when Harness as an organization initially started thinking about this, we felt like, where is that core story that needs to be out there in popular culture that gives us that coordinated vision that we all believe in, you know, of the world that we want to see. And this guide synthesizes over a decade of research and experience into what we know is the core story that activates audiences. So I'm very excited and honored to introduce Erin, who has been a pioneer in bringing together culture and social justice work. In the 1990s, she co-founded the Milarepa Fund and the Tibetan, I'm saying that word. Yes.
Tibetan.
I was like, I know that word. The Tibetan Freedom Concerts with the Beastie Boys, and started working with artists on elections since 1996. She went on to lead several other efforts to help artists create change, including the Culture Group and Revolutions Per Minute. Today, she is a consultant specializing in cultural strategy and research, and she is our cultural strategy lead for Culture Surge and the co-author of this guide. So with that, I'd love to welcome Erin.
Great, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? Yes? All right, awesome. So as Maria already said, we believe that artists and culture makers are the visionary leaders that we need in this moment. As storytellers and artists, you have the power to create change in the world through the stories you tell. Because you and those who preceded you throughout history have done it time and time again by telling compelling stories that inspired us to imagine our best futures. Stories about our power to make the world that we want. And now, here we are, facing this era's most important election with demands for change rising across America. We need you to do it again. We need you to help inspire even more people to take action, to take over the streets when necessary, to protest loudly, to continuously hold our decision makers accountable, and also to vote for true public servants to represent us at every level of government. And I think most importantly, we need to recruit our friends and loved ones to join us. How can we achieve all this? A flood of stories about our personal agency and freedom have always preceded the most important moments of progress. A lot of research exists about how stories work. Kirk Cheyfitz, who is a narrative expert and is on this call to answer your questions, has studied 15 years of academic, market, and movement research on this. He and I joined forces to synthesize what lived experience and all of that research tells us about why stories power change. We created this guide specifically for storytellers on what we found. At the heart of what we found is a core aspirational story, repeating itself in a multitude of ways, but all with this common theme. They're stories that show people a vision of the future, of the world that is possible. And they motivate people to take specific acts to get there. In fact, the core story is really clear that a new world is possible only when we, the people, act collectively to demand it. Our research also showed remarkable convergence around the kind of world that people want and are willing to work for. It is one of inclusion and care, plenty, equity, and joy. The more we can talk about this world in detail through stories, the more people will be motivated to do the kind of hard work it takes to achieve it. So if storytellers and artists can rally around this core storyline, telling their own particular piece of it in their own particular ways, the power of the stories will be exponential. And to capture the essence of this core story, we created a very short expression of it, what we sometimes call a story platform. It goes like this: we, the people, have the power. Acting together, caring for each other, we will imagine and create the world that we want and need. Joyful, protected, and safe, where we each belong, where we all can thrive. Now, within the research on this core story, we also found several story threads, we call them. And we want to explore them because we think that they can lead to an infinite trove of stories and subplot ideas that can fit within this core story. And you probably see them already in some of the stories you're telling or hoping to tell. The first story thread revolves around stories of personal and collective power. Stories that show how collectively the power of people to make change is unlimited. These collections of people can be a block group, could be a block party too, I guess, a community of faith, a group of sports or music or graphic novel fans, a national organization, or any other expression of social, political, cultural, and spiritual coming together. When people work together, we've seen that we can beat the powerful few who seek to divide and control us. A great recent example of this is the story of K-pop fans and TikTok teens working together to disrupt white supremacy messages online and at Trump's Tulsa rally in June. The second thread is stories of abundance, stories that show that we have enough money and talent to create and sustain the opportunities and the public institutions essential for our common good, that we can have world-class healthcare, excellent neighborhood schools, preeminent and free higher education and advanced skills training, beautiful parks, first-class public transportation, efficient clean energy infrastructure, and so much more. We can showcase this abundance through stories of helping one another, tiny community gardens that produce fresh vegetables for dozens of families, neighborhoods that practice mutual aid, cooperatives and other employee-owned businesses which send profits to workers and really show us new ways to control our work lives. This is happening in many groups of immigrant women who formed cleaning collectives throughout the country as an alternative to an otherwise exploitative industry. All of these stories can remind us that scarcity is both an illusion created to divide and keep us down, and an argument designed to prevent us from exploring possibilities and questioning existing priorities. Next are stories of people leading the way by caring. These stories show how the best people to decide what change should be in a community are the people of that community, acting collaboratively and caring for each other. And by each other, I mean for all of our kids and grandkids and elders, not just some of them. A recent example of this kind of a story is the two-part POV documentary series called And She Could Be Next. It tells the story of 8 incredible women who ran for office in 2018. Next, we need more stories of joy. While the forces we fight against are significant, we also feel joy in working together for the good of all. For the people engaged in this work, it's about making happier, healthier, and better lives for ourselves, our families, friends, and neighbors, and ultimately for everyone. Working to change the world is not about carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders, but rather the joy of belonging, of expressing our own identity, creating our own art, making families, and on and on. Instead of showing you an example here, because there's a lot of great ones, I'll just leave you with one of my favorite quotes by Emma Goldman, who this quote has sort of guided my own path in activism since I was a teenager. And it says, "If I can't dance, I don't want your revolution." The next thread includes stories of belonging, stories of allies and connections that defy barriers. These are stories of making our communities and our country a home where human differences are seen and equally valued, and where everyone is safe and sustained. These stories can show that government and community are the structures we build to unite us and to do for each other what none of us can do on our own. Things like ensuring equal treatment and opportunity, protecting us all from physical, from physical and economic harm, and sustaining us and our planet. In these stories, we can also step into a shift that's already happening in culture. And that shift is a change in the notion of the lone hero, going from a straight white male solo operator, think Superman or Batman, to a diverse, more everyday kind of team of heroes like Black Panther and Guardians of the Galaxy, or in real life, the amazing heroes of the Black Lives Matter movement, or the Parkland students, or the US women's national soccer team, or even those K-pop stans on TikTok. And finally, stories of curiosity and the future. These stories can narrate how childlike curiosity about each other and our society and the universe is the pathway to understanding and unity. Stories that question fundamental assumptions and that celebrate seeking and understanding of other generations or cultures or beliefs. These could include stories of people crossing cultural and racial lines to find out about each other and to forge bonds across all varieties of human difference. And it could be stories where people ask fundamental questions like, what kind of world do we want our children to grow up in? Why does our culture try to confine all people to just two genders? Why do we tolerate capitalism when it generates need and poverty, even in the richest country in the world? Why not abolish the police? What if we invested in collective care? And so on. Culture Surge is here to support the telling of this core aspirational story in an infinite variety of forms, through countless voices, thousands of viewpoints, including especially voices of those whose stories are not widely heard. Most important, we believe that each story must be told. Each story told must be true to each storyteller's personal creative vision. We believe these stories can and should be told in any and all forms: film and video, paintings and posters, poetry, murals, songs, symphonies, dance, photographs, books, magazine stories, social media posts, ads, letters to the editors, and so on. Fiction and nonfiction, short and long. Now, there's always a strong temptation, especially in a national election year, to abandon inspirational storytelling and focus solely on what and who we are against. And there's obviously no shortage of things to fight against right now. And then there's also those who believe that it's enough to only broadcast the message, vote. In fact, I used to be one of them. But what we've learned is that this fails to support our long-term mission to imagine and build the world we want. It also goes against a lot of research that finds that such tactics at best don't affect turnout or the election's outcome. And at worst, they can backfire. For those of you who are interested, the last 2 pages of the guide will explain the basis of all this. And it has some of the many research projects that we studied and that led to this core story and the story threads. So if you're interested in getting in the weeds, it's all there. Kirk is also here to answer any of your questions. You can put them in the chat or address them to the person that is questions on the chat function. We have two storytellers, and I'm going to stop my screen right now. We have two storytellers who invited us to reflect on the guide. The first is Gloria Calderon-Collette. Because of her shooting schedule, she couldn't join us in person, but she sent a quick video that we're going to play to tell you what she thinks about the guide.
Hello, storytellers, artists, and activists. How are you? My name is Gloria Calderon-Kellett. I am the executive producer and showrunner of One Day at a Time. And I am so happy to be connecting with you, however briefly, through this medium, and wish you so much joy as you go about creating yourselves. This is a really unique moment to be creating. I think it's an opportunity to have growth. And I hope that you are all trying to find connection in this very uncertain time. I think it's an opportunity for us to refocus and to sharpen our knives so that we can better fight for when this is over. And I know that during COVID, I've been staying inside and masking and doing all of the things, and also really sitting with intention and what types of stories I want to tell on the other side of this. There are so many things that resonated with me when I read through the guide. The biggest one probably was "We deserve joy," which I love because we do. And it is, to be living joyfully is its own revolution. And I hope that you guys are finding joy in your creative endeavors. And then certainly in the power of story to create change. We've seen it. We've seen how culture changes society and changes policy, and how taking a moment to tell our real lived stories allows people a real entree into who we are. So I so encourage you all as you enter your next creative steps, and sending you lots of love.
We're about to go into Q&A, but I just want to say, Kirk, is there anything that I forgot about to mention about the guide, or what our research shows before anybody asks specific questions?
No, I really think you covered it all, Erin. I'm just looking forward to everybody's questions.
Awesome.
All right. With that, thank you so much, Erin. And we're really looking forward to having a conversation. I know the questions are already coming in. I'm going to give a couple quick instructions into how you can ask questions, and then we'll go from there. So in order to make the process smooth and get to everyone's questions, we ask that you raise your hand if you have a question. And the way that you do that in Zoom, if you don't know already, since we've been in this Zoom multiverse now together for about 3 months, you can go to the bottom bar of your Zoom and click on participants if you're using a computer, or more if you're using a mobile device or a cell phone, and select raise hand. We will then call on your name. I'll call on your name and unmute you so you can ask your question directly. Otherwise, as Erin has mentioned, you can send your question directly to the named questions in the chat box, who has already kind of sent a chat to everybody. So you can just respond directly to them if you want to share your question a little bit more privately. So with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and start off with one of the first questions we've received. Kirk, I'm going to give it to you, which is, I'm in a very conservative area. Or the person that's asking this question is saying, I'm in a very conservative area where people routinely vote against their own interests and are solidly supporting candidates who are the absolute worst for making their lives better. I'm at a loss as to how to tell stories that connect with this population. Do you have thoughts?
I do, but I'll only share a couple of them mercifully with you. Where we find common ground is, I think, not in the policies or political pronouncements that so often divide us and that we argue about ideologically, but in the things that really unite us. And those things are all contained in this core story. Caring about people, caring about community, wanting a better world for our kids to grow up in, for us to grow up in and survive in. All of those things, telling real stories about real people can break through those barriers. They're about the only thing I think that can break through those barriers. And just to end this, Michael Slater, who's a narrative theorist working at Ohio State, has said that it's really hard to argue with people's lived experience. And I think it's particularly important with people who disagree with us politically, simply to share the human basis of our beliefs, because we share those with almost everyone.
Beautiful. Erin, is there anything you'd want to add there?
No, Kirk, as always, is more eloquent than I am about everything.
Beautiful. Well, the next question is, I am thinking through this individual group dynamic in an upcoming storytelling project regarding COVID, when ultimately we do want people to change their individual action. In order to benefit us all, how do we tell stories of collective action?
Again, I think those stories, and one of the pillars or rich storytelling areas or threads that Erin went through really speaks to this. We being all of us, have won so many victories, particularly at a local level and neighborhood level. I can think of 10 or 15 of those stories that have not been sufficiently told. And those kinds of stories build agency in people. And that really is the key. As Erin said, I can't repeat it often enough. What gets repeated and what has worked over and over again throughout both ancient and modern history is this notion that first we must imagine a better world. And then we must understand that we have the collective power to make that better world real. And with those, looking for those two themes in the life around you, the life of your block, your community, your city, your nation, there's lots of examples, great stories to be told that can truly activate people.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing as well? We, in the guide, which you all will be able to download at the end of this webinar, we couldn't fit all the examples that we found for each of the story threads. So we have a spreadsheet of 50 something other ones that you can click in the guide to access, and that will, we'll keep that updated as we're finding new and current examples in there, just as like kind of fodder and food for thought or inspiration for some of these. So, and then if you see any out there in the world that you think we should be aware of, please send them to us and we'll give you all the contact information at the end as well.
Great. So the next question that we've received is, I'm at a purpose-driven organization that is very cerebral and data-minded. How would you recommend communicating the importance of not just data, but stories?
Well, I was on a panel with researchers and data scientists and neuroscientists yesterday, in fact, and one of them had a slide in his presentation that said data is dumb. And it was a quote from an academic. And I think just by explaining what we all know to be true, that data can tell us a lot about people, but it's not very good at telling us why. And it's the things that can't be quantified that often have the power to change the data. We can't always think our way out of every problem that we have. Sometimes we need to feel our way as well. And I think those sorts of arguments can make even the most hardened data scientist understand that numbers aren't everything and numbers don't tell the entire story. I hope that helps, and I know it's a hard job to do because there are people who do believe that numbers say everything. And our current political speech is really hemmed in by those sorts of, binary numbered oppositions. But I wish you the best in breaking through those barriers and know that there are those of us out here also fighting the same sorts of battles.
Erin, is there anything you want to add there?
I'll just say I've done really quick storytelling exercises at the start of meetings on occasion that helped people understand the power of story. And one quick one is just turn to the person next to you and tell your life story in 2 minutes, which is, it sounds hard. It can be easier than it sounds. And then think about the difference between hearing somebody tell you 2 minutes of their life versus reading their bio or their resume or the data, the paper on them. And it shows the richness, the difference between what story is and what a bunch of X's and O's sort of thing in a resume or a story. So, there might be tricks like that you can do internally in your organization. I will also say I love data, but data's only good until it's not. It's only helpful until it's not. So so I think we need to marry. We need story, and we also need some data to help us understand certain parts of our audiences or our issues.
Yeah. Before I move to the next question, the only thing I would add there is some of the most powerful stories that we see today that are impacting every single one of our lives is not driven by data at all, right? And so that's something that we just have to recognize is data is important and necessary, but it's not the complete picture. So the next question here is around, and we have a lot of questions, so I'm just kind of trying to move through them, but these are really great. What are the most influential ways of telling stories to shape the narrative for the upcoming election? Is it through TikTok or other influential platforms? I have a thought here, but I want to give it to our experts first.
I've always said that the important channel, right, media channel, is the one the people you're trying to reach are using. So there's a lot of channels that are open, and the people we're trying to reach, I think, are using all of them. So it's wherever your vision leads you. I personally try not to worry too much about channel. I think TikTok I'm no TikTok expert, by the way, and you can see that I'm not its core audience, but I've watched it a lot, and in the sort of the form of the perfect TikTok video has enormous possibilities, but so do lots of other media as well.
Erin, is there anything? All right. I mean, the one thing I will say here that I heard from a couple of the cultural strategists we work with, specifically Yossi Sargent from Into Action, is that in this current moment, it's about quantity. It's really about producing as much content as we can on as many platforms as we can, because that is really, with the diversification and fragmentation of media, trying to get a core story like the one we're presenting out there is important in every version possible, because it's about breaking through the noise, and so one piece of content will not accomplish anything. It's all of us coordinated working together that will really help shift popular culture and reach critical audiences. So the next question I have here is, give me a second. Any tips on how to draft and shape resistance messaging that catapults communities as a whole and not only advocates or activists? So specific leaders, basically.
I mean, the best advice and the advice I think that's in the guide, although I wouldn't describe the guide as advice per se, but as a guide, is real life is one great story to tell, and it's a way that showing people what it is we're fighting for. I think way too often we in talking about resistance, all we talk about are the things we are resisting. Erin said, as she was talking about this, that we, especially with an election coming up, there's this huge temptation just to tell everybody what we're against and what we can't stand to have happen for another 10 seconds or we'll go nuts. When the motivating thing is, what's the positive result we're trying to bring about? What's the world we can win? What are we going to make our political leaders do for us when we finally have a set who at least are listening and may actually be paying attention? That's, I believe, the power of where the power of resistance really comes from.
Can I just throw in as well? You know, what I was saying about teams of leaders as opposed to individual leaders, I think is important because we see each other more in groups of leaders than in singular leaders. I think also the role that the majority of people in this country are engaged in culture and entertainment and sports, and they're not listening to the news. And there is a role for us, those of us who, want to dance and be part of the revolution. And so I think we tell more stories about that. We tell more stories about having fun and being joyful and doing it in group with other people. And through that, we start moving away from the cult of personality, maybe that your sort of, that question is implying that we have in the progressive or social justice movements.
Yeah, definitely. A question around artists and storytellers specifically, which is, what is a strategy to get artists who are underrepresented and generally inactive in politics? How do we get them to think about creating for change outside of course, this webinar?
I mean, I wish Fabiana, one of our anchors, was on this call because the work that the Center for Cultural Power is doing, the work that Harness is doing, the League and IllumiNative are 4 core anchor organizations. They're all doing that work, 365 days a year, not just in election years. And so, I would really look at some of the lessons that they're learning and they're talking about. Maria, I know you're supposed to be facilitating this, but maybe you can take your facilitator, hat off and answer this one, because you're more steeped in that than anyone probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in a lot of the work that we've done, we see that it's showing storytellers that they actually can have an impact. Some of this might sound really basic, but explaining to an artist or a storyteller how their work impacts people is really important. And it's something that we kind of assume that they know, but actually many people don't. And so really helping people recognize the power that they have and that they're really, really needed in this moment. The power of art and storytelling is always transformative. But in this moment, when we feel so unclear about what the world looks like and about what the future looks like, the power of the imagination is crucial for us as a species, honestly, to move ourselves forward. And so for storytellers and artists to really recognize the power that they have, and it, again, like, it's an issue of quantity, not quality. So you might be making videos on your Instagram live, you know what I mean? It's not necessarily about like mass impact, but it's about activating as many of us as possible around kind of a core story. And I think what we'll see from creatives as they start to get activated around this election and this really crucial moment is that we're going to see incredible content come out that we never have seen before, right? In response to an unprecedented moment. And so just really, really reminding people of the power that they have and that their voices are crucial in this moment.
I'll also just say there's also funding strategies to support people who are creating that are not typically getting distribution. And so we will be trying to post as many of those opportunities for creators of color, creators that aren't mainstream. Whenever we see them, we'll try and post them either on our website or in future newsletters. If you all know of any, or if you are a funder on this call and you have one of those funds, please let us know so that we can share it.
Yeah, part of the goal behind Culture Surge is to provide a space for people to be able to speak to each other, right? And one of the gaps that has existed is that those that are looking for art to be created, whether they're nonprofits or funders, whether they are people working on specific campaigns, whatever that might be, they have trouble actually often accessing artists. And so this is supposed to be a space where you can find that ability to really plug in and connect and use your art and storytelling for good. So the next question we have here is, beyond crafting our story, a major challenge is getting it seen or heard. What suggestions do you have for expanding the reach for our creative storytelling, especially beyond our own echo chambers?
Kirk, you want to take that first and I'll take it second?
Sure, that's a deal. Distribution and getting attention are tough, as I understand. But I think, to Maria's point about quantity, if 1,000 artists tell 1,000 different stories around a similar theme, then even if each of their individual audiences is 6 people, that's 6,000 members of an audience who will then pass it along. The theory of social media is pretty well understood now, and it's available to all of us. And it's amazing the kind of audience you can get for no money at all. So I would counsel everybody, don't worry about the size of your audience. It's great if you're running a network show and you've got an audience of 2.5 or 3.5 million. But it's also great if you've got 25 friends on Twitter. There's all kinds of ways to present this material and spread it around. Erin?
Yeah, I mean, distribution is the final nut to crack, I think, for the cultural strategies field. That there is a lot of great content out there that just doesn't get seen outside of, as the person who asked the question said, the echo chamber, sorry. But Culture Surge is trying to put some light infrastructure into place between now and the election to help amplify content that fits into this story platform and this core story, and that we think will help motivate people towards the election. And I think in general, the only way that we are going as a progressive or social justice movement, the only way we're going to reach large audiences is if we start engaging, we start coordinating more. We tend to work in silos and, doing our own thing, and we're overworked, and, especially this year between COVID and the protests in defense of Black lives, and election, it just feels really overwhelming. But the more we can coordinate, I think the more we can amplify each other's work. And then again, we're going to be trying to put into place some things to help amplify the movement. So keep creating, let's all figure out distribution and amplification together. And again, we're talking to lots of experts in the field to help us try and figure out what we can do to help amplify folks.
And I would just add, I think, look, there are a typical 30-second ad from the Biden campaign, for example, they'll buy an audience of millions. They can buy an audience of any size. Thank goodness they've got some money in the bank to do that. But the best research tells us that 99.9% of all the political outreach of major campaigns actually persuade no one. They have zero net effect, and that's been found over and over again. What I think is exciting about this effort is that the stories that are created by the people on this call actually have the potential to reach people, actually have the potential to get past the conscious into the unconscious, to touch people's emotions and to really move them, because that's where we make our decisions, is unconsciously. And again, any halfway decent neuroscientist will ratify that notion. That's why this is so critical, because it's so different from the political numbers game that goes on. We need to support our ideals emotionally through our commitment to them, and by telling stories that really matter to us. And therefore we know if they deeply matter to you, they're going to deeply matter to other human beings as well. That's the whole basis of art as opposed to politics. And it's very, very powerful, and it has the ability to persuade. So I wouldn't sell this short, because whatever you do doesn't have a mass audience. And I also know there are people on this call who have access to mass audiences, and God bless you, that's great. But if you don't, it really is the sincerity and the depth of the expression, as well as plus the quantity, that I think moves this into a culture changing opportunity. And that can do the trick.
Absolutely. And yeah, just to add on to what Erin was saying, we're in conversations with major media companies who do have access to hundreds of millions of people, and talking about different kind of content campaigns. And so if you have an interesting idea or program, that's definitely something you can come to us. We want to highlight really important creative ideas and content as it comes out of our network. And, we're looking into paid media and PR, and like really robustly thinking about how do you permeate popular culture and utilize all the levers that are available to us. And so, there might be pieces of content that people really want to put a lot of money around because we feel like it's going to be really compelling to those key audiences in those states that we've identified. So what I would say is, be creative. That's who you are, right? And think about the best ideas you have, and how you can impact your audience. But there's also people who have audience that are looking for your ideas, and we're connected to a lot of them. So feel free to also come to us if you have things that you feel like could be really impactful. There is two more quick questions. One is, there was a question in the chat around TikTok. How do you see TikTok shaping the narrative for the upcoming election? I had a conversation recently with a cultural strategist, Jason Resepka, who used to be at MTV, who said something really powerful. He said, every election has a corresponding media platform, right? So he was like, there's been like a Facebook election, there's been like a MySpace election. So people that work in media or culture, they often talk about that. And he said, there's no doubt that this election will be a TikTok election, in the sense that TikTok is having an outsized impact, right? So it is a platform that we are talking with influencers, we're talking to gamers and folks that are really already on this platform and on similar platforms to help understand how it is that we can infuse it with this type of content. And it is a really powerful tool, but I don't think you can undermine Facebook or Instagram, or which are democratic, quote unquote, in some ways. We can all access them and have content on them. And I say that because through the research that we've been doing, we've seen that certain segments of populations have an outsized impact. So for example, women, an example would be like Latinx or Black women, have an outsized impact because not only do they decide, okay, we're going to vote, but they encourage their family and their friends to vote, right? And so and those people, those moms might not be on TikTok, right? They're probably going to be on Facebook. And so really for us to strategically think about what's the audience that we're trying to get to, and where does that audience live, and how can I really speak to that audience? And knowing that you have credibility with the people that know you first, right? And that you shouldn't undermine that. And then this last question that I have here is, how do the core themes that Erin, you discussed today, work for visual artists who aren't necessarily telling a story from beginning to end?
Well, my closing slide has one on it. So should I just go to that?
I think we should go to the slides and go from there. But
yeah,
all so much.
Yeah. Well, I will say, you know, again, Fabiana Rodriguez is one of our anchors, and she's been experimenting with you know, these themes, I guess, as you call them. We were calling them threads. And if you can see my screen, can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so you can see she's in a retreat or an artist residency right now, I believe, and she started playing with one of the themes. I think this was the first one, actually. Together we have power. Vote 11-3-20. This is like just a mock-up of something that she's doing. It's an artwork in progress, but that might give you some food for thought. And we'll continue to share as she creates or others create visually on this. So in terms of what's next, we would love for you to download the guide. You can go to the website. I think Kira is going to be putting it into the chat as well, so you can just click on it. And then we really want you to start creating. We're here. You can email us any of the things you're creating, as well as questions at hello@culturesurge.com. And you can also, we'll be issuing some creative challenges and prompts and activations. And so if you join us and become a member at culturesurge.com/join-us, you'll get our emails and all of our information. So we'll make sure to have some prompts for visual artists in there too. And then finally, next week, we're going to be doing another briefing. This one is going to be focused on political strategy and what the creative community can do around key civic engagement events like National Voter Registration Day, Vote Early Day, those surge weeks that Maria talked about at the beginning. We're gonna have some of our favorite political minds on the call, as well as organizers and others. And I think that Kira is going to put the link into the RSVP for that into chat as well. And we'll include it in follow-up on this. So we want to say thank you very much for coming. Please stay in touch. We hope this has been helpful, and please, again, keep sending us feedback on it as you dig into the guide. And we have a post webinar poll that we would love for you to fill out to help us figure out what you might need moving forward, given what you know now about the guide and about what Culture Surge does. So please fill that out, and thank you.